Hello Munchkins and viewers alike, it's me Munchie and welcome back to a Munchie Talk discussion. Today I really wanted to touch on this topic, which is adoptions versus ethical breeders. Now I don't want to put one up against one another. What I'm trying to get at here is there is pros and cons to both sides and we should respect both sides. So I'm not going to be for just mainly adoptions, even though I do run a rescue. I know what ethical breeding does and the benefits of it, and I wish to share with you guys my knowledge and understanding in hopes you guys can also understand why we advocate for think adoption first and for ethical breeders as well. Now, the only thing we should be in an uproar about that is really severe is one of two things, which I'll just knock right off the table first. We are not going to be discussing about wild animals or wild caught animals. So this is only domestic animals because we do not advocate for taking animals out of the wild and placing them in someone else's care because they belong in the wild. Domesticated versus wild is a completely different topic, but that's one of them that I want to just knock off and say, yay, we don't advocate for and you shouldn't either. The other is backyard breeders. Now, backyard breeders, I have a whole list to be talking about why backyard breeders are really bad. I will touch on a few things in here when comparing ethical to backyard because some people might not understand. But for the majority, backyard breeders are not ethical breeders. Ethical breeders, I will define here in a second. So let's start with adoption first because you guys are very familiar with it, and then we'll touch on something that you guys might not be as familiar with, and that is ethical breeders. I rescue hamsters, gerbils, and mice, and sometimes maybe some other animals as well. But adoption definition, in my definition, is adopting an animal whose owner could no longer take care of the animal, making them homeless or soon to be. Now, you can adopt any species of animal from a shelter or a rescue. It doesn't need to be cats or dogs, not the common ones. You can adopt small mammals, you can adopt reptiles, you can adopt birds, fish, you name it. Also, for purebred animals, they can end up in shelters, so if anybody is looking for purebred, definitely it's a good idea to check shelters first because purebreds can end up there because what people tend to do, just from my experience with working in a pet store, they went after an animal that they liked because they saw it, they didn't really do a lot of research into it, or they just were beginners and they didn't understand the dog might not have been their lifestyle that they thought they would have in the first place because they see other people and they want to mimic that, but then they themselves reconsider it. So a lot of the times you see purebred Yorkies, you can see purebred Australian Shepherds, cattle dogs, you see them a lot in shelters because people don't understand the commitment that they come with, especially for huskies. Huskies is one of those poor animals where people do not understand the drive huskies have, and they like the energetic and bounciness. And Mishka, when she was still alive and a celebrity on YouTube, everybody wanted a husky because they thought it was cute, but they did not understand the commitment of which they were getting into. So that's why I'm talking about purebreds today, because they do still end up in shelters, and if you are a specific person looking for a specific purebred animal, please also consider it. Another thing to consider is shelters, they tend to spay and neuter their large mammals such as cats and dogs. So if you are one of those people that does not want to go out and do that yourself, they can provide that within the adoption fee. And shelters can have lower adoption fees. It's all thanks to private funding or grants they are given to make it reasonable for people to consider adoption, because adoption fees can be high in certain rescues that are foster based or shelters if they don't have the funds. Usually if you see a high fee in shelters, that does indicate that that fee comes with the spaying, the shots given, rabies, microchip, you name it. That price is included in the adoption fee. So sometimes it might be a better deal not having to do all those things yourself and instead relying on the shelter to take care of that, because that's included in the fee. Also, another benefit to adoption and for shelters is that you will not have to pay full price for this animal. Now, people might see $600 being a very high price tag, but if you look at that animal and look at how much a purebred or a dog like it is going for, just backyard breeders or ethical breeders selling them, they do go for a lot higher than people realize. When you get a purebred, you are paying thousands of dollars versus a shelter animal, which is half that cost. So that's another reason why it's a good idea to adopt. While some animals do take a lot longer time at shelters to adjust. There are animals at shelters that are just ready for a new home, that have great temperaments, that don't have really any health issues to be concerned with. They are not broken animals. They're just animals with unfortunate circumstances. And those unfortunate circumstances could have been moving, birth of a child, medical issues, allergies, deployment, say for instance, deployment overseas if you're in any sort of army or Marines, and of course, loss of funds. There is times when you might lose your job or lose your funding and you cannot support yourself and support your poor little animal with you. So a lot of the times people make the harder decision to rehome so that your pet does not suffer alongside what you are going through. But sometimes there are people that will get rid of their animals because they see them as a lesser being. Everybody's mindset is different when it comes to surrendering to a shelter or rescue. So please keep that in mind, that there is some good animals out there, and there's some animals that need more time in shelters. But usually shelters do a really good job, I want to say, of making sure that their pet profiles are spot on, so there is no error of returning the animal because it doesn't work out. Because the information is there, it is provided, they do tell you what works and what doesn't work, what the temperament is, so they can better match you up so you don't have to return your animal. Whereas when you do get an animal, say for instance from a breeder, you may not know what this animal will turn into because you are raising the animal from a very young age, because ethical breeders will give you an animal that is very young so you can raise them yourself. Sometimes it's even a better course to go to adoption versus ethical breeders because there is an already tame animal with that set skills, that they're much older versus younger. You might not have as much experience. You know, there's all these things that could possibly happen, but that's just another thing to keep in mind, which is a benefit for people who do not want to go through puppyhood, because oh my gosh, puppyhood with my puppies was quite not the fun. No, I'm never doing that again. If I am going to get a dog, just my personal preference, I am not going to start off with puppyhood. I want to avoid that if at all possible when I get another dog in the far future. So let's talk about ethical breeders because they deserve a lot more respect than some people realize. Now let's just get into what ethical breeders' definition are when it comes to my point of view on them. Ethical breeders have a passion to breed specific animals, to better the breed, promote healthy bloodlines, and to create future lines that will be healthy and flourishing. Ethical breeders don't just include cats and dogs. They can be for smaller mammals, reptiles, birds, and fish. It doesn't just need to be cats and dogs, although documented better are cats and dogs when it comes to, say for instance, American Kennel Club, which I want to talk about here soon. In some species of pets, it's actually harder to find ethically bred animals because a lot of the animals may come from breeding mills, which mass produce live animals for big chain stores such as Petco and PetSmart, and in other countries, your big chain pet stores. Because I don't know every name of outside of the state's pet stores. I mean, there's Pets at Home, but Pets at Home is starting to do adoptions. In some stores, they are partnering with ethical breeders, which is amazing to hear because these breeding mills do cut corners, and unfortunately, they are geared more towards coloration rather than temperament and health of the animal. They do not consider those at all because these animals unfortunately are display pets when they go into pet stores, because the pet store wants people to buy a living animal and they kind of see it as an item. And so if you buy a living animal, you'll buy all the accessories in that store alongside it on that purchase. And then unfortunately, they just see that animal as being profitable and selling more and more of those. And it becomes a problem when there's a higher demand. So it's a better idea when it comes to smaller animals to get them from breeders versus pet stores where you really don't know the background of those animals that come from those mass-produced places. Ethical breeders do this for a hobby. They do not make 100% of their profits back from raising those animals in the first place. They do this because they want the bloodline, the species of the pet that they are caring for, to succeed and to flourish in the future for our future generations. Just think about it. If nobody was breeding golden retrievers, we might not have a purebred golden retriever in like 2080. That's also another thing, is to preserve the bloodline. And ethical breeders raise their animals in healthy environments, the appropriate environments. They get the appropriate nutrition for that pet. They provide vet care, and they will record their pet's traits and attributes and genetics, and they will not stop when the animal gets sold to a loving family. They will record everything, and they will keep track of everything. And if it is a dog breeder out there, there is the American Kennel Club, and then I believe there's also the Canadian Kennel Club as well, the CKC and AKC, where registered breeders go and register their litters. It is a good idea, if anybody's out there looking at ethical breeders, to make sure they have the appropriate paperwork. If they don't have paperwork and they claim they're purebred, it could be a whole bunch of balooey. And on that note, ethical breeders are not backyard breeders, because backyard breeders take risks because they want to make 100% profit back. They do it for the investment in that animal, and unfortunately that means not providing enough nutrition to them. Maybe they are weaned too early. Maybe they, say for instance, don't get them their shots, which they so desperately need, because there is horrible diseases if these animals and puppies, cats, and all the big ones, at least for these shots, if they don't get their first set of shots, it could be very life-threatening to that animal, and you might have some deficiencies down the road. For instance, if you get a parasite, or if your dog gets a parasite and they're living with it for such a long time, even though you don't know where the dog's background comes from, and you're just taking a chance by trying to buy this animal from this person, if they are a backyard breeder, not registered, cutting corners, not providing what the young animals need before rehoming them safely, you are probably going to end up getting a sick animal. And I hear that so often. Oh, I bought this online thinking that this person was legit. Turns out it wasn't. My dog died from this disease or that disease, or had a weakened heart because of poor nutrition, not being fed. My dog was underweight when I got it. There are so many horror stories for backyard breeders. They are nothing like ethical breeders. Nothing. And I absolutely hate backyard breeders because they put that animal at risk. You have no control once you are born of what happened when you were in development in your mother's womb. Just see it from the point of view as an animal. If you are born with some sort of health concern that could have been avoided if the person went to the vets, got some blood tests, did some x-rays, looked at the genetics of this animal, had the proper history of this animal, then maybe something could have been avoided. But for breeders that are ethical, they will keep those records, and if, for instance, one of their animals doesn't perform well, they will guarantee and make sure that that is recorded, that if this bloodline does not work out, that they go in a different direction to guarantee the health and safety of future animals from them. So just as a conclusion to these two topics of adoption and ethical breeders, the general public will agree it's best to think adoption first. But if there is a reason you cannot adopt, please think ethical breeders. There is American Kennel Club themselves, so you can go and look at dogs on their websites, or you can go and look up associations, especially for smaller animals. There's a hamster association, there's a mouse association, there is different reptile associations, especially for snakes, which are very common pets, spiders, leopard geckos, etc. You can find online legit groups that are there for the well-being of that animal, more so that you can trust a Craigslist pet ad. But maybe there is a reason you want to go with breeding. So here are some reasons why you may want to go with breeding versus adopting. There is a lot of people that have told me in comments that you don't have a rescue or shelter near you, or that you've checked your local shelters and rescues near you, but you cannot find that specific animal of which you are looking for. For instance, you may be looking for a gerbil, and all the shelters and rescues around you do not house critters. Or you are looking for a specific animal to do a task, say for instance, maybe like a herding dog. You're looking for a specific herding dog, but all of your shelters seem to have are toy breeds and breeds that are not herding animals. Remember, we gotta be courteous and think a little bit about each and every one of us and our different lifestyles, because there's people that live out in the country. There's people that live in the city in apartments. There's people that are looking for small critters. There's people that are looking for reptiles or birds, and sometimes it could just, depending on where you live, be absolutely hard to find. Or people just don't have any good luck. Also, another good point, you may need a service animal, and unfortunately, depending on the task of which the animal needs to perform, say for instance, if you need to find an animal that can put your weight on them and stand up because they help you get up, you need to find a dog that has healthy genetics and healthy hips. If you went to a rescue, you might not be able to find that information out. So that's why a lot of people will look for service animals for ethical breeders, because they got the history of the animal. But there are people out there that just like a specific breed. Say for instance, corgis are very popular, or huskies, or Pomeranians, and they love that breed to death and they don't want to go with any other animal. That's totally okay. That is their preference. And sometimes people will check out shelters first before deciding on a breeder. It's not the end of the world if they can't find one at a shelter when they look. And sometimes people have looked for months with no luck and they're tired and they're waiting and they want a dog. It's okay to get one from a breeder. If it wasn't for breeders in the first place, that animal may not have been around to be admired by us. So breeders are definitely important. So if you're concerned with people purchasing from ethical breeders, just listen. You are not going to be able to force your views onto someone else because you have no control over that situation. And if they do not want to listen to you because they are dead set on their decision, it's not worth arguing over. But there's also reasons to go adoption versus going to a breeder. Say for instance, if you're looking for an emotional support animal, good news, any animal can be an emotional support animal as long as you know their temperament and if they get along with your lifestyle and life choices. Any animal, I repeat, can be an emotional support animal. You don't need to go to a breeder to get one of those. And if you do not need an animal to perform a specific task and are just looking for companionship and want to give that animal a loving home because they are homeless, that is also another good reason to look into shelters. Also, there's people out there that pursue shelter animals because they want to adopt, say for instance, a special needs animal, maybe a senior, or they just want to help out an animal because it's touched them and they have a bleeding heart, and that is what they do. They are kind to animals that are homeless, or they like the task of taking on maybe a bigger responsibility and seeing it through to the end that this animal was changed for the better. And also, these animals bring joy to us. So if you're just looking for an animal for companionship, shelter animals are a good idea. And also, shelters are really good if you are one of those people that are looking for an animal and it's mainly sold at a pet store, because you don't want to be supporting pet stores because of the way they breed their animals. But if you happen to see one already in a shelter that somebody had bought from a pet store previously, gave it up, and then it needs a home, I mean, that's a good deal because you're not putting money in the pet store's pocket because that's already happened. You're putting money towards this animal at a shelter. And the good news about adopting from shelters is you are decreasing the number of animals in a shelter at that time, and you're also giving room to future intakes from that shelter for people trying to surrender and from just animals picked up off of the streets because of animal control. When there's a decrease in a shelter of the number of animals there, it increases people to look and consider to drop them off in shelters rather than just setting them loose outside. It's horrible. People still do it. They do it for any species of animal. I have found some pretty sad and devastating stories about people releasing guinea pigs into the woods, gerbils, parrots. Oh, it's just, the list goes on, and it's awful because they just didn't want to bring it to a shelter, or the shelter denied them because they didn't have the room. If they don't have the room and resources, don't force an animal on them. Try your best to look for other places and or look online, because sometimes life happens, we get it, but don't leave that animal hanging, please, for the sake of the animal's health and well-being. You were their caretaker, and once their caretaker is gone, they have no way of defending themselves. So just consider that if anybody in the future had to, for whatever reason, get rid of their pet, please consider that. So, bottom line, ethical breeders deserve your respect, and so does homeless pets, because homeless pets are not broken things. I want these stigmas of, oh, ethical breeders are just a bunch of slobs, or oh, these adopted animals are just fixer-uppers and, you know, broken animals that are neglected and have bad temperaments and bad health and blah, blah, blah. That's not all necessarily true. So let's come together here. Both sides need to be promoted with the right understanding of why they are needed in today's society. We need them both. Breeders create a better future for animals and specific species of animals. And adoption creates a better life for an animal, giving them a second chance. So that is the difference between those two major things, adoption versus ethical breeders. So thank you guys so much for listening to me chat today, to you guys in person, here in video format on YouTube. Oh my gosh, this was a really big topic. And thank you for listening and understanding and maybe changing how you think about ethical breeders or how you think of adoptions. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like to show support, comment down below with your thoughts. Please make sure they are civil. I don't want this chat to erupt in a bunch of angry, ragey people. You guys gotta understand, it works both ways. I hope you understand a little bit more today from watching this video. And if you're new here and would like to become a part of the Munchkin family, please subscribe and I'll see you in the future Munchie Talk videos. And thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye!